Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. Hello and welcome to a Captain's Mindset podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Freiberger, and after spending the majority of my life in the pursuit of becoming an airline captain, I realized getting to the top of the mountain in my career was not where the happiness and satisfaction were. At the age of 34, I quit my job to pursue a new life as an entrepreneur. This podcast is my way of helping people who feel stuck in life, or even for those who hit the top of the mountain but still don't feel very happy or satisfied or fulfilled. I'm here to help you change that. It's time to become the captain of your own life. I'm not perfect. I don't pretend to be. This podcast is full of not only my life lessons, but lessons from other successful leaders, not only in business, but in everyday life. I hope you find some value, and if so, please subscribe and share this with other like-minded individuals so that together we can make a positive impact on the world. Thank you and enjoy this episode. All right, welcome to another episode of Captain's Mindset Podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Freiberger. Today, I got joining me a fellow pilot, friend of mine, used to be a former colleague of mine, Keith D'mello. Keith, how are you today?
I'm great, Kyle. Thanks for having me.
Sweet, man. So we just had some good conversation before this, before we started hitting record there, talking all about leadership and talking about the career progression that you're in. Keith is a distinguished airline pilot for a major airline, and has built up his ranks throughout his life. We share a commonality. We went to the same school. I remember you many years ago now, back in the school days, and progressing now to not only a pilot but an entrepreneur on the side as well, helping other pilots to navigate the difficulties of the career, to navigate towards the common goal to get to the airline and how to do that. And so let's dive right into that, Keith. Tell us a little bit about your background, because I think it's super unique, and then we'll kind of see how that ties into leadership and what this podcast is all about. But
perfect. Yeah, thanks, Kyle.
So how did your career start off? Tell us how it started off, and then what got you, like how you progressed, and then what got you into helping other people.
So I'll keep it very brief. So I came to Canada as an immigrant. I was 14 years old, and I was never into studying at all in school. I was always the star athlete, track and field. And when it came time for determining what you want to do for a living, I was getting like literally D's, E's, and F's in school. So the guidance counselor sat down with me and then went through all of my, school marks, everything, and then told me literally like, I don't really see you doing anything in life, right? And then I grew up very strong Catholic, right? And I've even had my own parish priest, et cetera, tell me like, you're not going to make it anywhere in life. I've had many, many people tell me that.
Wow.
Yeah. So
there's some good motivation to prove them wrong, right?
Yeah, I literally had my own classmates tell me that kind of stuff. So I really believed it, right? I'm like, oh, okay, so that's what it is. Like it made sense to me at that time. So then fast forward, when everybody's trying to go to university, college, right? Everybody's trying to choose what they want. And I'm looking around to see what I want to do. And I couldn't think of anything that I would find myself being interested in. So one day I remember sitting at the bus stop waiting for my bus, and then I saw this Air Canada airplane fly over, and I looked at it and I said, that's it. That's what I want to do for a living. And I didn't think about like the fact that I'm failing everything in school, nothing like that. I'm like, So I finally had, for the first time in my life, some goal to achieve, right? And it would have been, it's like 1,000 light years away from where I started, right? So then very next day, I started taking everything seriously at school. I started studying really well. And then I learned one of the first mistakes I made is telling everybody, what I wanted to do, because I thought people would be happy for me, but everybody, the same people especially who told me that I would not do anything, now they're like, huh? They were laughing like, you think you could do it? Like, there's no way, right? They would never hire you, et cetera,
Yeah,
like that.
trying to pull you down.
Yeah. And so then I got some motivation, right? I'm like, okay, I'm going to show them one day, right? And fast forward,
Man, that's funny.
yeah. So, now my life didn't change because of that. I enrolled in the Air Cadets during that time. I was, learning to fly gliders. I enrolled in this college program, Sioux College. And my whole life up to that point, I wasn't really good in studying. So even when I was there, I remember studying for 8 hours a day. I would study something and I would forget exactly what I studied. I would completely forget what I would study.
Yeah.
My mind, I didn't know how to study. That was a skill I didn't know. I didn't know what are my learning habits, right?
Yeah.
So I remember the school offered tutoring during off hours. And that's when I actually met Kyle for the first time. He was this, I remember being like this really smart kid, right, in school. And he seemed very calm and composed.
Perception's everything.
Yeah, he didn't seem like this party guy, in college. He just seemed like this very focused guy, and he was always good in school. And so I did a couple of math tutoring with Kyle, etc. And it really helped me out. And I remember doing well on some of my courses, etc. like that. But eventually, I did end up failing out of the program for the flying aspect. I used up all my remedial hours of flying. The school provides you 5 hours of remedial training because it's all paid for by the government at Sioux College. So I used them all up, and it was probably the first big failure I had in my life at that time. It was very tough for a few years, and then I told myself, what do I want to do for a living, right? I still want to be in aviation. I like airplanes. So I enrolled myself into maintenance school, and I graduated actually as a top graduate this time. This time I really focused and I studied. I knew, how to study at that point. And I graduated as a top graduate as an aircraft mechanic, and I got a job as an aircraft mechanic after that as well. I've done many, many jobs after that until where I am right now as an airline pilot. And what made me start my business and helping people on the side is I always told myself, whenever I make it, as an airline pilot, I always reach back and help other people because I never really had many people or anybody actually try to help me out. I remember always reaching out to people who are airline pilots and they would just ignore me, right? I would ask them for help, and it was like I was like this little ant asking them, like beep, 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 right? They would not want to help me out. So I always told myself, I'm going to reach out and help out people, right? So that's how it started. That's how my whole business career started.
Man, that's there's so many things I want to dig into already, but that's it's more of the story than I even knew initially. But when you were young, having those people, kind of holding you back, having that limiting belief, and going from that to actually doing that thing that nobody thought you could do. And I think in today's modern day and age, we can't, there's more and more people starting to tell their stories like that. But I don't think we can overemphasize how many or how important it is not to limit yourself and not to listen to what other people say about you. And you're the only person that can possibly understand what you're capable of, and you don't know until you try. So a couple of things that I want to dive into is number one, why, you said a couple of times that, you had some setbacks, like you had some bad grades, you failed out of college or flunked out of college or whatever you want to call it. But ultimately you ended up at the initial goal, right? Is that correct?
Yes.
You're an airline pilot now?
Yes, that's correct. Yes.
So are they fail? So did you fail? That's my question.
I think I didn't fail because I didn't stop. So, I would have failed if I had stopped.
Exactly. I love that answer, man. And that, that right there is a great lesson for anybody listening. Think about it. It's only failure if you actually stop. like even if you didn't end up an airline pilot, you ended up an airline mechanic. Is it not safe to say that you became an airline mechanic because of your initial desire to become an airline pilot? And it's not a failure to stop being a pilot and become a mechanic. It's just part of the process to becoming that airline mechanic.
Exactly. And maybe in the future, I might choose to do something else besides being an airline pilot. But at least I can look back in my career and say, you know what, you had this one goal and you didn't quit because times got tough. You've evolved after that, but at least I did it, right? So I can move on to bigger
Absolutely.
things, after that, but at least I didn't give up on the original goal.
Absolutely. Like similar to you, I actually had a very similar experience. Like a lot of people looked at me funny for wanting to become a pilot. I was very young, but when I went, it was actually my first flight, and I also looked up at an airplane and I was like, oh, I want to do that. And I think I was 9 when that happened. And
Wow.
it's funny, it's because like you said, like nothing stands in your way. Like when you have that purpose or passion, it didn't matter how I got there. And to the same kind of degree as you, or to the same thing as you, I actually failed a couple of things as well.
What?
And I failed, oh yeah. And that's because, again, like everybody assumes that, success, or, I graduated top of my class. I don't know, like whatever, top 3 in my class, was the first one to the airlines. And, I was like 23 when I got to like, great. But I was just motivated more than, good, or like I was good at a certain skills for sure. But I ended up failing a flight test at one point, and then I went back, learned what I did wrong, and then I aced it, right?
Wow.
Which, again, it didn't fail it. I just messed something up because we're all human. We're all flawed human beings with, weaknesses and things that we need to improve. So that begs the question, is it a failure? Well, no, because I didn't quit. I kept going. I learned from it, and here we are today. So I love hearing stories like that. Switching gears a little bit, so right now you have a business on the side. You reach back to people who are trying to make it as an airline pilot. What do you see the most common challenge that people face in that industry? Is it similar? Is it setbacks? Is it people not believing in them? What do you help people with?
Yeah, so one of the biggest businesses I have is the airline interview prep. So I help pilots pass major airlines and regional airlines interviews. And I've done over 200 so far. And the thing that I've noticed the biggest, because you see patterns, right? I could be completely oblivious, and then I'm like, hey, wait a minute, there's a pattern going on here. So then I notice the patterns, and then I record videos and I put it on my course so that I teach people exactly what I'm noticing. And the biggest pattern I see, there's a couple. If I can go through a few of them, if you're okay with it. So one is that I notice people always chase the next thing in their career without actually pausing and looking back at how far they've come. So when I ask them a simple question like, okay, tell me a time this happened in your career, or what's the best, what's the most fun you had in your career? It's like one interview question, or what's your greatest achievement or accomplishment in your career? And I get blank stares and people can't tell me anything. I'm like, really? Like in all these hours, like there's not one thing that's like stands out or one thing that's fun, and they can't do anything. So I kind of have to, dig deep and ask them, goes right from the start and kind of go through their entire career journey. And then everything comes out and they're like, oh yeah, this happened. Oh yeah, that happened. And I realized like nobody stops to think about how far they've come. They always beat themselves up and say, oh, how come I'm not there? Oh, this guy in my class, this girl in my class is at this company. How come I didn't get it?
Mm-hmm.
Versus looking at all the challenges I've been through before and overcome. So that's a big one.
And how does their demeanor change when you get them to focus on those gains?
Their demeanor, I noticed that something lights up on the inside. It's almost like you bring up a spark from before that it kind of like died down because of challenging times, or they didn't put focus on it. So it's kind of like being grateful, So they look back and say, huh, yeah, this is pretty cool what I'm doing right now. I've done this, I've done that, I've handled this emergency properly, I've handled this conflict with this coworker properly, and now they're able to tell the story. So that's actually a big pattern that I see. Another one is
that's awesome. Like just touching on that real quick, Keith.
Yes.
There's a concept called the gap in the gain, and I talk about it on this podcast and in a lot of my coaching. It's actually the foundation of it all. And the idea, and a good time just to touch on it. Have you heard of the concept?
Yes, actually, you told me a while ago about this book, right? It's called it talks about it, right? The gap in the gain. I haven't read it yet.
Yeah, it's all good. So again, it's exactly what you're describing, right? And most people have an ideal, a place they want to be. It's like, when I achieve X, when I achieve an airline captain, then I'll be happy, then I'll be satisfied. And that's what they're chasing. That's what they're going after. And until they get there, they're relying on getting there to become happy or having this positive sensation of like success. And it doesn't make rational sense, because when you get there, you're just going to go to the next thing. Like, I was an airline captain. I stepped away from it. I actually quit, the successful job because I realized, okay, well, I'm there. I actually enjoyed the process of getting there the most. I enjoyed the challenge. I enjoyed the growth that came with that challenge. And not that I didn't love my job. I actually would recommend that job to anybody, and I would be completely satisfied staying there, up until the point where I realized that I had other skills, underlying skills that I developed throughout that course of becoming a pilot. And those skills I could help other people with. It's kind of the same thing that you're doing. And I think this is why you and I gravitated towards each other over the last little while, is that it's just like you said, like getting that help. And a lot of people didn't help you. And then now you're here and you want to reach back and help those other people. And that's giving that sense of purpose again. And that, that's like a continuous thing. And I think they say like acts of service is the best form of acts of service is like the ultimate form of purpose or passion. And then so that's the gap thinking, is when you're always focused on where you're not. But the gain thinking is always focusing on where you are versus where you were. And it's not to like solve any of your problems. It's to shift our mindset to always being positive. Yeah. Because if you're going into an airline interview prep or airline interview, and you're thinking about the gap, if you're thinking about I'm not there yet, you're going to go in and your demeanor is going to be very negative.
Yeah.
It is, yes. You're not even going to notice it.
No, you're not going to notice it.
But if you think about those career highlights, like you're helping people think about, your demeanor absolutely changes, right? It changes, like, it's like you said, something inside gets triggered. Exactly. And then you're going into that interview with a positive attitude, and you're not thinking about, oh, what if I don't get it? You're not thinking about all the anxiety with it. You're thinking, hey, I'm here. I actually was vetted and I passed to get this interview. That's cool. That's incredible, right? So dude, I love that concept.
What you said is amazing. What you said is amazing. Honestly, that's what I tell people. I said, whether you get the job or not, just be proud that you're, in this office with these people. Like you get to the thing where you read the sign of this airline on the board. I'm here. And and personally in my interviews, I tell people at the end, like the interviewer, I said, I know you're gonna, choose the best candidate, all the best. Whether I get it or not, I'm just so happy to be here today. You won't believe this is my dream to just be here in this room talking to you, right? So that's what I tell people.
Yeah, that's awesome. So it's kind of funny how it all overlaps, right?
Yeah.
So what else do you notice from your candidates as you're trying to help them?
So when I do the interview preps, I don't go into canned answers. So I try to like dig deep into people's own answers. But one thing I do that I don't see anybody else doing is that I try to take away people's neediness from getting the interview. It's like a different energy I find. So if you go into the interview, or it's like back to my single days, as a guy many years ago. I'm happily married now, but I remember early when I was trying to like do dating. If I really saw a attractive girl, I'm like, I need her, I need her. It's so funny. Like she didn't want to talk to me, right? But
Yeah.
until I got to a point where I took care of myself first, I was like, okay, there's plenty of people in this world, right? And I went in kind of calm, cool, and didn't really need it. Then it's a different energy. You kind of you're not trying to impress anybody, right? You're just
Yeah.
happy with yourself, and whether it happens or not, your life is good regardless. So that's what I tell people. I said, when you go for the interview, this is not your one and only chance, and it's done, right? I'm kind of guilty of that sometimes in my marketing. I kind of tell people, hey, what, you got to pass. You might not get another chance, but that's partly my fault. But when you actually sign up, I tell people, hey, listen, this is just one out of many interviews, right? So go in with that mindset. In fact, flip the script. I always tell people they're happy and grateful that you showed up for the interview, because they need qualified people, and people not only qualified who can fly the airplane, but who are nice people who can make a 4-day trip with another pilot beside them, go with ease, right? The soft skills, I tell them the interview is not testing to see how great of a pilot you are. They can already tell based on where you worked from the resume. They would have hired you just based on your resume. The reason they're calling you in person is to have that connection, is to see how you would get along well with somebody for a long time. And they ask questions about trying to get you to talk bad about your employer or coworkers. So don't talk about that, right? Just talk about all the good things, right? They just want to see, are you going to be a personable person, right? It's more like the soft skills. So, and the only way you can do that, I find, is that if you go in with that non-clingy energy, it's like, this is one out of many opportunities I'm going to get. You guys are happy to have me here because I bring a lot to the table. So it's just something I try to communicate.
Yeah, confidence versus cockiness, confidence versus narcissism. It's a lot of people that I've helped in the coaching side or the leadership side. It's people have a hard time going to difficult conversations. But the most difficult conversations are the most exciting conversations. Yeah. And if you learn the language of how that works, because a lot of times we're focusing on like the selfish stuff. Like it's like, how does this affect me? Right? It's all about me, me, me. And it's not typically you don't mean to be selfish. And what happens is you're helping other people look at it from flipping the script. Like look at it from the other side. If you were interviewing somebody, right, for a job in your company, right, and let's say it's a specific skilled job, and they have that skill, and they have 10 years of experience with that skill, are you going to question the skill? Probably not. The skill's there. They have track records. They got references. They've got, right? So they're not going there to ask you about the skill. They're going there to see who you are. Okay, do you get along with people? It's like, why? Well, you get along with people because you're not sitting there trying to be needy, right? And the way that I always like to explain it to people is there's wants and there's needs. And a lot of people think that they need something that they just want. A need to me is a survival. It's like I need food and water, right? I need that. But I want a companion.
Yes.
And I want companionship, and I want friendship, and I want all of these things, but I don't need that companion. And that's a big difference. That's a big difference for people. When you're in a relationship and if you're dependent on that dependent, if you're, and that's the bad word for that, but if you have a partner and you, in your head, I need that partner, it doesn't matter how bad the relationship is, you're going to be so fixated on that need that you're going to be selfish, thinking, okay, I need this person in my life or I'm going to not be able to handle it, right? And that is a scarcity mindset. That's not a mindset to live. It's sad. And dude, it's kind of funny because I had a very similar experience when I started to accept myself. So I had bad relationships. When I started to accept myself for who I was and stop thinking that I needed to get this relationship or needed to get that girl, I found the love of my life.
Wow.
It was so funny. First date, and I would have married her on the second date, and I was never I was never going to get married. And to this day, I'm just who I am. I stopped faking it. Right. And when I stopped faking it and I keep practicing, and I want to be a better human being all the time, but when I practice being this better human being and I just be who I am, it's so much less work than trying to fake who you are. And it attracts the people into your life that coincide and that amplify who I am, as opposed to fix who I am or replace who I am or any of those things. So I love that that second challenge that you see consistently, and it's just another great thing for anybody listening to this to take a step back, to listen to, you know, Keith and myself and who we are. And this is us sharing perspective, not telling you the answers. This isn't us being like, we know how to do it. This is me, you know, and Keith saying, listen, like we've effed up a bunch of stuff. We've failed. Hey, there's no perfect science to this, but at the end of the day, if you don't give up, if you keep going, then the outcome will be the best outcome that you can get. That you can hope for. It might not be an Air Canada or a pilot. It might not be, you know, whatever that goal is. It might evolve. It might be something totally different. But if you didn't start on that path, then you might not have got to that end result that you end up at. So it's much less about the outcome and much more about the progress and the process. But yeah, turning it back to you, Keith. What do we got here? We can go for, so we have about 5 minutes left.
Okay.
What's like a book? I love asking about books. What's a book in your life that, you know, you've either listened to or read, and it was at the right time, it was the right material, and it helped you just shift into, you know, the person that you are or the career that you're in or whatever?
Yes, that's a good question.
Any
and
good books?
In my bookshelf at home, I'm not home at the moment. I have multiple tiers of the bookshelf. And the most important books is not just one. I keep it on the top of my bookshelf. Basically, the lower I get on my bookshelf, the less useful the books are. And eventually I'm just going to discard them, because I used to be a guy who used to read a lot of books, you know. I used to look at Ty Lopez online. He's like, you got to read a book a day and this and that. So I used to buy a lot of books. And then later on, I realized the quantity of books does not matter as much as I would rather have the top 5 or 10 books that I read every time in my life versus trying to pick the new marketing, the fanciest cover in the front of the the Barnes & Noble, right? When you walk in. So I don't really have one book, but I have a few books on the top of my bookshelf where I just go all the time. I've highlighted the crap out of those pages. So one book that I'm reading currently right now, and that applies to my life at the moment, because as I'm growing my social media, as I'm growing my business, is 48 Laws of Power. And people misunderstand this book a lot. They think it's a book on manipulating people, etc. And it is not actually. So one of the chapters, you've heard of this book, Kyle?
Oh, yeah.
So one of the chapters in the book talks about envy. So why this is important to me is because I find that for some reason, when I hit the 3,000 follower mark online, I started to get the most amount of hate I've ever experienced in my life, all at the same time. I can't explain why, right? It came from all directions. Family, I didn't expect it to come from family. It came from family, it came from friends, co-workers. And I used to think these people were my friends. So when I read this chapter in the book, it actually, I could have seen the warning signs ahead of time. So one of the chapters on envy. And one of the techniques the author talks about is how do you spot envy in someone? And he says we're all envious of people to a degree, but how do you spot where it's destructive is that you tell somebody something positive that's happening in your life. And he says watch for the micro expressions in the eyes. Initially, someone who's not happy for you might show, might not show that they're happy for a microsecond. You can miss it if you don't look, right? So versus you tell them something good about yourself, they also might, have the opposite reaction just for a microsecond. So just watch for those micro emotions. And just a couple other things the author talks about, right? So that's something that's applies to my life at the moment, because I'm like, to me, everything in life, I feel like there's lessons to be learned, right? Different stages. If I'd read the same book a few years ago, it wouldn't have applied. But now that I've gotten so much, pushback recently, it applies. I'm like, you dummy, you could have seen this before if you read this book, right? So for now, this book is what's useful to me to understand people's nature, right? To understand different people, because in business, I have to work with a lot of people. And I can see, I want to know people's intentions before I work with them, right? So that's a big book for me. So, 40 Laws of Power and the Laws of Human Nature, it's by the same author.
That's amazing, man. Yeah, it's a great idea. When I stepped down from my position as a captain to pursue other things, I had a mixed bag of reactions. I had people who were, kind of were following. They knew that maybe I would step down, that, they were kind of prepped for it a little bit. Like specifically, like my mom was my biggest cheerleader, but then I also know that she says to other people, like, she was, not sure why I was doing such a crazy thing. And it's like, so, and then I sat down for breakfast with a friend of mine, and he actually got mad at me in a public restaurant for stepping down. And, and it's funny, old Kyle would have reacted. I would have reacted in those situations. But new Kyle and, Kyle that's done a lot of work on himself, Kyle that, kind of same as you, like we're all just work in progress. New Kyle realized, I looked at every single person, and I just looked at them with a empathetic mindset as opposed to a judgmental mindset, because I can understand that I'm challenging the way a lot of people think. Yeah. When I step down from my $300,000 a year job that everybody would, love to have, and then I give it up. Am I just, too good for it? Am I not grateful enough? And so you get all these different reactions, and but in those moments is, you have to realize that you're a leader. We're all leaders, and that's the concept of this podcast. Is no matter whether we know it or not, and whether we like it or not, we're influencing the people around us, whether that's positively or negatively. And you don't always have control over how people perceive you, but as long as you know what you're doing and you stick with your aligned values and you're positive, then you will most likely influence the people around you positively. And you have to focus on that. And, that's how you become the captain of your own life. That's how you start to steer your own car, your own ship. The moment people react abnormally means that you're not doing the normal thing. And you and I both know, and everybody listening, the normal thing is not really where we want to be. The normal thing is, making your normal amount of money, having your normal house or your normal car. Most people are shooting to have something better than that. But then they think having something more should be some normal thing, but it's not. So if you want to be above normal or above average, or, this idea of common sense, being common amongst all people, I'm like, I'm not any of that. I want to be more. And I don't want to be that in a narcissistic or selfish way. I just mean I want to grow, and I want to grow more. I want to keep growing. How do I push myself? So that's the kind, and then when people react, and when people are envious, and when people are looking at us like, oh, well, who do you think you are? It's okay. We're all human, and we all, we're all progressing in our own way, and we're all learning at our own pace. But doing something that you're doing, helping people navigate the waters of becoming a pilot, becoming an airline pilot, it's funny how much that overlaps into real life as well. Because I ask you a few questions on this episode here, and we talk about, it might be a career of a pilot, but it's just life skills. It's not just a skill to become a pilot, it's life skills. And that's one of the biggest things you can get out of. So no matter what you're pursuing to do, there's underlying skills that you're practicing. So whether the outcome becomes a pilot or a mechanic or a coach or whatever, it's the skills. That's who describes you. That's how you define yourself, the skills, and not the thing that you are. You're not defined as a pilot. So my long rant, but any closing thoughts, man? Any
what you said is absolutely correct. And in fact, COVID, as bad as COVID was for myself and a lot of people in the industry and other industries, it's exactly what you're talking about. It, for the first time in my life, I de-identified myself as being a pilot. So if you look at any of my social media and stuff, I rarely have pictures in uniform. Not because of getting in trouble at work or anything like that, just because I don't really identify myself as, oh, Keith's a pilot. Like, it's something that I do. It's like one of my many skills, right? I find that because if you identify yourself too much to a certain thing, if it gets taken away from you for whatever reason, you're not going to be happy, right? So there's, I'm a dad.
Identify with an external thing.
Exactly. Yeah. So that was the thing. And the last thought I can give to the audience, that I find that really helps me. And if I'd done this earlier, I would probably save myself at least, I would say, 10 years of misery, right? And that would have been to love myself first. I grew up Catholic, but I never really followed any of it, right, until later. And then one of the teachings Jesus says is, love others as you love yourself. And I never really understood it. And later on, and in fact, later in my mid-20s, I realized you can't give something that you don't already have, right? So I had to love myself in terms of treating myself as my own best friend. People will do anything for somebody else, but when it comes time to, spending a little bit of money on yourself or getting that extra, topping in your meal or something like that, something small, or being kind to yourself for, any mistakes you made, people don't really do that to themselves. So I learned to do that to myself and, be my own best friend. And by doing so, I did this every single day. My cup was kind of overflowing and I'm just like naturally happy and I want to help people. But if I had known this ahead of time, I would have been so far ahead in my life and career, because I wouldn't have been like this guy sitting alone, not asking for people for help, just trying to do everything on his own. I would have been like, outgoing, asking, my friends and making more friends and, starting things earlier that I should have done instead of, always beating myself up. That was a big thing I did, right? So that goes back to not loving yourself. When you beat yourself up over the smallest things, right? So I don't do that anymore. I just look at it and like, oh, I'll just change it for next time. just like very logical. I'll just change it for next time. I don't beat myself up. So I just, I think, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, I think everything we talked about here, if there's a general lesson, it's exactly what you just said, right? And I like to go one step further and say, like, because again, like I've thought about the idea of loving myself, right? But then I'm like, well, what is love, right? What is love like to you? That's a good question. I'll just start there, and then I'll go into what my perspective is on it. Like, if you could describe what loving yourself, what does that mean?
Yeah. So on the surface, it sounds weird, right? Loving yourself, it's just, people tell you take it to mean like you buy stuff, like really expensive, blow all your money. No, I personally, for myself, I don't know what the right definition is, but for myself personally, loving myself is knowing that I'm human. I'm going to die one day was the biggest realization out of this whole thing, that I'm going to die one day. And, me holding grudges to myself, to anyone, it's not going to matter. In 10, 15 years after we're gone, we're all going to be forgotten. This whole thing, like, we don't know what's going to happen. So that's where the self-love, like, I'm here on this planet, I better, make my, be a net positive in this world, right? And so that's where the love is. It's from knowing my own mortality appreciating myself, looking back at all the things I'm grateful for. I'm grateful for my health, my family. It's many aspects, and sometimes it had to take COVID to make everything to a complete stop to then think like, what is important in my life? Oh, wait a minute. I have people I love. How can I give them more love if I don't love myself? So I had to go back and do lots of, deep diving into my own life. What do I like about myself? What do I, what can I improve upon? So the concept of love for myself is just daily reflection on these tasks. If I go too many days without being grateful, I'll go back to my old habits, right? So it's like a daily bath I have to give myself.
Yeah, man, I love it. Like I think love is the acceptance of everything, and it's just like if you were to like, and I think that's exactly what you're describing. It's just like accept, like, and move on, right? Like a great way to describe that is if I'm not embarrassed, or if I'm not, if I don't look back to like who I was a year ago or 5 years ago or 10 years ago and laugh, like if I'm not like, oh man, if I only knew then what I know now, which you just alluded to, right?
Yeah.
So it's not about, because we can't go back in time. It's not even a rational thing to think of, oh, if I knew this 10 years ago, then I'd be in a very different spot. It's like, yeah, but you don't know if that would have been like a better or worse. So you don't even know, like you're in this spot because of not knowing that. And we love that we're like, that's crazy. This is where we are. We don't know what the other spot would have been. We don't know if it was better or worse. It's irrelevant. We're here. We're in this spot. We're here because of the thoughts, the decisions, the mistakes, the failure, whatever. All of that stuff had to happen for us to be here. So the only rational thing is to say, okay, I accept it. Here I am, right? Here's my strengths. Here's my weaknesses. Okay, what do I need to work on next? What's the next challenge? What's the next thing that I can do? But that doesn't start until you accept yourself or love yourself. And a big piece of that is forgive yourself.
Yes.
It's like you make a mistake. We're the only species that pay for our mistakes 1,000 times because we remind ourselves that we made that mistake. It makes no sense. Anytime you're spending focusing on the mistake, and beating yourself up, is a moment that you're not focusing on the lessons. And the moment you focus on a lesson, that means that mistake was a good thing, because if you didn't make that mistake, you wouldn't have learned that lesson. And that lesson is just growth. And yeah, this goes on and on and on. And man, I'm so grateful that you jumped on and we recorded this. And I hope everybody listening got some value out of this. Last question, just to close it out for fun. I love asking.
Oh boy.
If you had a superpower, whatever, it can be anything, make it up. It doesn't have to be a generic one. What would it be?
If I had a superpower, it would be that I was a fast learner. I would not.
It's funny. That was exactly the last guy said that too.
Oh, is that right? Sorry, I haven't watched the last episode.
Oh yeah.
But
no, that's funny.
Yeah, it would be to be a fast learner, because the thing is, you can have a setback, whatever, but if you take months and months, or in my case initially it was years, to get over certain things, the sun is just going to keep coming up every single day, and you're just going to be stuck in that thing. It'll never move on. You can, what I call looping. I just keep looping on things, that I could have done, but I can't change it. So
yeah, I
don't loop anymore. I just learn. So a superpower that I've gotten significantly better at is, crap happens, I move on now, tomorrow, like immediately. If I can move on in 5 minutes, even better, right? So that would be a superpower that I want to get better at.
I love it. That's it, man. If you, anybody listening again, it does not matter what position you're in. We all have our challenges. We've all had our downs. It's not, the only consistent thing is that we all have shit in our lives. We have challenges in our lives. We're all going to step in. There's a Matthew McConaughey quote. I forget how it goes, but he's like, we're all going to step in shit sometime in our life. So we might as well get used to the smell of shit or something. And I'm like, thinking about it, I'm like, but that's true. Like, we're all going to have challenges. That's the consistent thing, is that we all have challenges. Even if you're rich, even if you're poor, it doesn't matter. There's challenges, I promise. And it's how quickly do you take that challenge and say, okay, what are the lessons? That's it. the quicker that you can go from, oh, I wish that didn't happen to me. Oh, why did this happen to me? To, oh, what are the lessons? What am I learning? What's this challenge teaching me? The quicker you can do that, the quicker that you grow, and the quicker that you get to that next step that will bring you closer to whatever that outcome is or whatever that thing is that you want. So again, you and I could keep going on about this stuff, but we'll close it in. How can people reach you or find out about you, Keith?
Yes, thank you. It's a pleasure, Kyle. You're actually one of my childhood heroes, so it's an honor to be on the podcast. And I never prepared anything. This is just like 30 minutes ago, right, kind of thing. Joined on, and you're definitely one of my guys that I look up to. So it's a pleasure to be here. If people want to find me or reach out to me, you can look me up. It's just my own name, Keith D'mello, D'Mello. You can find me on YouTube, Instagram, and LinkedIn. That's where I seem to hang out the most. Thank you.
All right, I'll throw that in the show notes. And for anybody listening, if you found some value out of this, share it with somebody, subscribe, leave us a comment, ask us a question. I can get any questions out to Keith that you have. If you think about becoming a pilot, you got 2 pilots here, so we got lots of experience in that field as well. But I hope everybody has an awesome, wonderful day. And until the next episode, keep learning, keep working, keep practicing to become the captain of your own life. Thank you for listening to another episode. If you found value at all in this episode, please do me 2 very important things. Please give us a review on Spotify or Apple, and please share this on your social media or with somebody that you think would find value in it. These 2 things are super important factors in helping this information and this wisdom shared to reach and impact more people in this world. Together, we will make a difference in our own lives and in the lives of the people around us.